Chapter 5. At 4 o'clock in the morning, oncoming traffic is sparse, but each set of headlights pearls through the fine hairs in Edgeler Vest's ears. This is a pleasant sound, separate from the passing roar of engines and the Doppler shift whine of other vehicles' tires on the pavement. As he drives, he eats one of the Hershey bars. The silkiness of melting chocolate on his tongue reminds him of the music of Angelo Badalamenti, and the music of Badalamenti brings to mind the waxy surface of a scarlet anthurium, and the anthurium sparks an intensely sensual recollection of the cool taste and crispness of cornichons, for which several seconds completely overwhelms the actual taste of the chocolate. Listening to the murmur of oncoming headlights, engaged in this free association of sensory input and memory, Vest is a happy man. He experiences life far more intensely than do other people. He is a singularity. Because his mind is not cluttered with foolishness and false emotions, he is able to perceive what others cannot. He understands the nature of the world, the purpose of existence, and the truth behind the big lie. Because of these insights, he is free, and because he is free, he is always happy. The nature of the world is sensation. We drift in an ocean of sensory stimuli. Motion, color, texture, shape, heat, cold, natural symphonies of sound, an infinite number of scents, tastes beyond the human ability to catalog. Nothing but sensation endures. Living things all die. Great cities do not last. Metal corrodes and stone crumbles. Over eons, continents are reshaped, whole mountain ranges vanish and seas run dry. The planet itself will be vaporized when the sun self-destructs. But even in the void of deep space, between solar systems and that profound vacuum that will not transmit sound, there is nevertheless light and darkness, cold, motion, shape, and the awful panorama of eternity. The sole purpose of existence is to open oneself to sensation and to satisfy all appetites as they arise. Edgeler Vest knows that there is no such thing as a good or bad sensation, only raw sensation itself, and that every sensory experience is worthwhile. Negative and positive values are merely human interpretations of value-neutral stimuli, and therefore are only as enduring, which is to say as meaningless, as human beings themselves. He enjoys the most bitter taste as much as he relishes the sweetness of a ripe peach. In fact, he occasionally chews a few aspirin, not to relieve a headache, but to savor the incomparable flavor of the medication. When he accidentally cuts himself, he is never afraid, because he finds pain fascinating and welcomes it as merely another form of pleasure. Even the taste of his own blood intrigues him. Mr. Vest is not sure if there is such a thing as the immortal soul, but he is unshakably certain that if souls exist, we are not born with them in the same way that we are born with eyes and ears. He believes that the soul, if real, accretes in the same manner as a coral reef grows from the deposit of countless millions of calcareous skeletons secreted by marine polyps. We build the reef of the soul, however, not from dead polyps, but from steadily accreted sensations through the course of a lifetime. In Vest's considered opinion, if one wishes to have a formidable soul, or any soul at all, one must open oneself to every possible sensation, plunge into the bottomless ocean of sensory stimuli that is our world, and experience, with no consideration of good or bad, right or wrong, with no fear, but only fortitude. If his belief is correct, then he himself is building what may be the most intricate, elaborated, if not to say baroque and important soul that has ever transcended this level of existence. The big lie is that such concepts as love, guilt, and hate are real. Put Mr. Vest into a room with any priest, show them a pencil, and they will agree on its color, size, and shape. Blindfold them, hold cinnamon under their noses, and they will both identify it from the smell. But bring before them a mother cuddling her baby, and the priest will see love where Mr. Vest will see only a woman who enjoys the sensations provided by the infant, the scrub smell of it, the softness of its pink skin, the undeniably pleasing roundness of its simply formed face, the musicality of its giggle, its apparent helplessness and dependence deeply satisfy her. The greatest curse of humanity's high intelligence is that, in most members of the species, it leans to It leads to a yearning to be more than they are. All men and women, in Vess's view, are fundamentally nothing other than animals. Smart animals, indeed, but animals nonetheless. Reptiles, in fact, evolved from whatever fish with legs first crawled out of the primordial sea. They are, he knows, motivated and formed solely by sensory stimuli, yet unable to admit to the primacy of physical sensation over intellect and emotion. They are even frightened of the reptile consciousness within, its needs and hungers, and they attempt to restrict its sensation, seeking by using lies such as love, guilt, hate, courage, loyalty, and honor. This is the philosophy of Mr. Edgeler Vess. He embraces his reptilian nature. The glory of him is to be found in his unmatched accretion of sensations. This is a functional philosophy, requiring its adherent to endorse neither the black and white values that so hamper religious persons, nor the embarrassing contradictions of the situational ethics that characterize both the modern atheist and those whose religion is politics. Life is, Vess lives, that is the sum of it. Driving north on Highway 101, finishing the second of his 2 Hershey bars, Vess considers, not for the first time, that there is a similarity between the texture of melting chocolate and that of thickening blood. He recalls the restful silence of the blood pooled around Mrs. Templeton in the shower stall before he disturbed it by turning on the cold water. The memory of the hollow drumming in that shower makes him aware of the coldness of all the rain as yet unleashed by the pending storm toward which he is driving. He sees a quick blush of lightning along the face of the clouds, and he knows that it tastes like ozone. Above the monotonous rumble of the motorhome engine, he hears the peal of thunder, and that sound is also a vivid image in his mind. The young agent's eyes opening wide, wide, wide with the first crash of the shotgun. Even in the airless void between galaxies, the light and the darkness, color, texture, motion, shape, and pain. The highway rose and the forests crowded close. On a wide curve, the headlights of the Honda swept across the flanking hills, revealing that some of the looming trees were immense spruces and pines. Soon, perhaps redwoods. China kept her foot down hard on the accelerator. To the best of her recollection, this was the first time she had ever broken a speed limit. She'd never been fined for a traffic violation, but she would be grateful now if a cop pulled her over. Her unblemished driving record resulted from her preference for moderation in all things, including the pace at which she ordinarily drove. Judging by the catastrophes that she had seen befall others, survival was closely related to moderation, and her whole life was about survival, as any nun's life might be defined by the word faith, or any politician's by power. She seldom drank more than 1 glass of wine, never used drugs, engaged in no dangerous sports, ate a diet low in fat and salt and sugar, stayed out of the neighborhoods reputed to be dangerous, never expressed strong opinions, and in general was safely inconspicuous, all in the interest of getting by, hanging on, surviving. Against the odds, she had already survived the events of the past few hours. The killer didn't even know that she existed. She had made it. She was free. It was over. The smart thing, the wise thing, the sane thing, the China thing to do was to let him go. Just let him get away. Pull off to the side of the road, stop, surrender to the shakes that she was strenuously repressing, and thank God that she was untouched and alive. As she drove, China argued against her previous conviction, insisting that the teenage girl in the cellar, Ariel of the angelic face, wasn't real. The photo might be of a girl whom he had already killed. The story of her incarceration might be only a sick fantasy, a psychotic's version of a Brothers Grimm tale, Rapunzel underground, merely a mind game that he'd been playing with the 2 clerks. Liar, she called herself. The girl in the photo was alive somewhere, imprisoned. Ariel was no fantasy. Indeed, she was China. They were one and the same, because all lost girls are the same girl, united by their suffering. She kept her foot pressed firmly on the accelerator, and the Honda crested a hill, and the aged motorhome was on the long, gradual downslope ahead, 500 feet away. Her breath caught in her throat, and then she exhaled with a whispered, "Oh, Jesus." She was approaching him at too great a speed. She eased off the accelerator. By the time she was 200 feet from the motorhome, she had matched speeds with it. She fell back farther, hoping that he hadn't noticed her initial haste. He was driving between 50 and 55 miles per hour, a prudent pace on that highway. As he drives, Edgeler Vess rolls down the window beside him and draws deep breaths of the cold air, which is rich with the fragrance of redwoods, which is the scent of power. This power flows into him with the fragrance, and his own power is thus enhanced. Redwoods are power because their great size is unmatched by any other trees, because they are ancient, many of these very specimens dating back centuries before the birth of Jesus Christ, because their extraordinary bark, as thick as armor and high in tannin, makes them all but impervious to insects, disease, and fire. They are power because they endure, while all around them dies. Men and animals pass among them and pass forever away. Birds alight in their high branches and seem freer than anything rooted in rock and soil, but eventually, in a sudden quietness of the heart, the birds swoon off the sturdy limbs and thump to the ground or plummet from the sky, and the trees still soar. On the shadowed floors of these groves, sunshine ferns and rhododendrons flourish season after season, but their immortality is illusory, for they too die, and new generations of their species rise in the decomposing remains of the old. Christ expired on a cross of dogwood, the Prince of Peace and Prophet of Love, but in the span of his life, not one of these trees had been brought down by any storm. Though they cared not about peace and knew nothing of love, they had endured. Busily engaged on his endless harvests, death casts frenetic shadows among the indifferent redwoods, a ceaseless flickering that dances across their massive trunks, with no effect, like the dark equivalent of leaping firelight on hearthstones. Power is living while others inevitably perish. Power is cool indifference to their suffering. Power is taking nourishment from the deaths of others, just as the mighty redwoods draw sustenance from the perpetual decomposition of what once lived, but lived only briefly around them. This is also part of the philosophy of Edgeler Foreman Vess. Through the open window, he breathes in the scent of redwoods, and the molecules of their fragrance adhere to the surface cells of his lungs, and the power of millennia is conveyed therefrom into his freshly oxygenated blood, pumps through his heart, reaches to every extremity of him, filling him with strength and energy. Power is God, God is nature, nature is power, and the power is in him. His power is ever increasing. If he worshipped, he would be an ardent pantheist, committed to the belief that all things are sacred, every tree and every flower and every blade of grass, every bird and every beetle. The world is full of pantheists these days. He would be at home among them, as if he were to join their ranks. When everything is sacred, nothing is. For him, that is the beauty of pantheism. If the life of a child is equal to the life of a bluegill or a barn owl, then Vess may kill attractive little girls as casually as he might crush a scorpion underfoot, with no greater moral offense, though with considerably more pleasure. But he worships nothing. As he rounds a curve into a straightaway, flanked by redwoods of even greater girth than any he has previously seen, stark white bones of lightning crack through the black skin of the sky. A roar of thunder like a bell of rage shudders the air. Rain washes the smell of lightning down through the night. Two scents of power, lightning and redwoods, electricity and time, fierce heat and stolid endurance, are offered to him now, and he inhales deeply with pleasure. Taking this county road through the redwoods along the coast and reconnecting with Highway 101 south of Eureka will add between half an hour and an hour to his travel time, depending on the pace he sets and the strength of the storm. But, as eager as he is to get home to Ariel, he could not have resisted the power of the redwoods. Headlights appear behind him, visible in the angled side mirror. A car. For nearly an hour, one followed him on the freeway, hanging at a distance. This must be a different vehicle, because this driver is more aggressive than the one on the freeway, closing the distance between them at high speed. Recklessly, the car, a Honda, pulls around the motorhome into the lane reserved for oncoming traffic, though this is not a passing zone. There is no other traffic, and they are on a straightaway, but the Honda has sufficient distance to complete the maneuver before the next blind turn in the road, especially on the treacherous rain-slick blacktop. Vest reduced his speed. The racing Honda pulls alongside him. Looking down through the windshield of the car, Vest has barely a glimpse of the person behind the steering wheel because the rain and the high-speed windshield wipers inhibit his view. Nothing more than a suggestion of a deep red shirt or sweater, a pale hand on the wheel. The wrist is slender enough to indicate that the driver is most likely a woman. She appears to be alone. Then the car moves far enough forward so that Vest is looking down on the roof and the windshield is out of sight. They are rapidly approaching the curve. Vest further reduces his speed. Through his open window, he listens to the shriek of the Honda as the driver accelerates. All the formidable power of that engine seems pathetically weak in these majestic groves, like the angry buzz of a gnat among a herd of elephants. With so little effort that he would not increase his heartbeat, Vest could pull the wheel to the left, slam the motorhome into the Honda, and force the car off the road. It would either roll and then explode, or shatter head-on. I pressed pause and it started recording. There was a car playing music, and anyway, recklessly, with so little effort that he would not increase his heartbeat, Vest could pull the wheel to the left, slam the motorhome into the Honda, and force the car off the road. It would either roll and then explode or shatter head-on into one of the 20-foot diameter redwood trunks. He's tempted. The spectacle would be gratifying. He spares the woman in the Honda only because he's in a mood for subtle rather than explosive sensation. This gratifying expedition has brought him not merely the Napa Valley family that he originally set out to destroy, but the hitchhiker now hanging in the bedroom closet, like Poe's lover of Amontillado in the stone wall of the wine cellar, as well as the two clerks at the service station. This is already a satiating richness. The reef of the soul is built from varied experience, not from repetitive sensation. Right now, he doesn't need the somber music of blood and the spurting warmth of screams. Instead, he needs to smell the wetness of the rain, feel the towering mass of the trees, and listen to the cool pendulousness of the night-hidden ferns. He applies the brakes, cutting his speed. The Honda streaks past him, kicking up a high spray of dirty water. It enters the curve ahead with a flash of brake lights, red in the black storm, red glimmering off the damp gray bark of the big conifers, apocalyptic tracers of red rippling across the pavement. Then gone. Edgeler Vest is alone again, behind the wheel of his Ark, in a colorless world of gray rain, black shadows, and sparkling white headlight beams, at peace to commune with redwoods and draw from them a measure of their power. He thinks of Christ on the vertical bed of dogwood, and the idea of the meek inheriting the earth makes him smile. He doesn't wish to inherit anything. He is a raging fire, powerful and hot. He will burn all the color out of this world, consume every scintilla of sensation that it has to offer, and he will leave behind a realm of ashes. Let the meek inherit ashes. Passing the motorhome, going too fast to prevent the Honda from straddling the double yellow line all the way around the curve, China had been afraid that the parched engine would cough and choke and fail. Now that she had seen the red warning light, she was aware of it, a peripheral radiance, even when she wasn't looking at the instrument panel. But the Honda ran confidently on dregs, on fumes, on some strange grace. She needed to put distance between herself and the killer and gain time to set her plan in motion. She pushed the cart as hard as she dared on the storm-greased pavement. The narrow road rounded another bend, straightened out, entered a gradual descent, took another curve, rose on a gentle slope but descended again, and in spite of the intermittent interruptions of these extremely low inclines, The land was generally monotonous in its contours, making its way steadily down toward the Pacific, not many miles to the west. Now, low ramparts of soft earth flanked the blacktop just beyond both shoulders, and this wasn't suitable for her purposes. But then, the road returned to the same level as the surrounding forest, and she entered another almost imperceptibly declining straightaway and found the ideal circumstances she required. She figured that she had gained a full minute on him, maybe a minute and a half, depending on whether he had appreciably increased his speed after she passed him. Anyway, a minute should be long enough. She slowed to 30 miles an hour and nonetheless seemed to be hurtling through the woods. She let the speed decrease to 25, wondering again about her headlong rush to heroism, but still unable to fully understand it. Then she drove off the roadway, flew across the right shoulder, thumped through a shallow drainage swale, and rammed into the fortress base of one of the biggest of the redwoods. The left headlight burst, the impact-absorbing bumper cracked and crumpled and collapsed as it had been designed to do, and Meadow shrieked briefly. Because she was wearing a safety harness, she wasn't thrown into the steering wheel or through the windshield, but the diagonal strap tightened so hard across her breast that she grunted with shock and pain. The engine was still running. With no time to get out and inspect the front of the car, China was afraid that the damage wasn't sufficiently impressive to convince the killer that someone could have been injured in the crash. When he came upon the scene a few seconds from now, he must take everything at face value without hesitation. Otherwise, if he was suspicious, nothing would work as she had planned. Immediately, she shifted the Honda into reverse and backed away from the tree, which stood inviolate. The ground was carpeted with wet redwood needles on which the tires spun before gripping, but not enough rain had fallen to turn the earth into mud. Rattling and clinking, the car bounced across the shallow drainage swale, which ran with only an inch or two of muddy water, and backed onto the pavement again. China glanced toward the top of the gently ascending slope down which she had just driven. As yet, there was not even a faint glow of approaching headlights from beyond the curve. He was coming, no doubt about that. Soon. She didn't have time to reverse even part of the way up the slope, but she needed to build a little speed. With her left foot, she tramped the brake pedal as far toward the floorboards as it would go, and with her right foot, she eased down on the accelerator. The engine whined and shrieked. The car strained like a spurred horse, pressing against the gate of a rodeo chute. She could feel it wanting to surge forward, as if it were a living thing, and she wondered how much acceleration would be too much, enough to kill her or trap her in wreckage. Then she gave it a little more juice, smelled something burning, and raised her left foot from the brake pedal. The tires spun furiously on the glycering blacktop, and then with a shudder the Honda shot forward, rattled and splashed across the ditch and slammed into the trunk of the redwood. The right headlight burst, metal squealed, the hood crumpled and tweaked and popped open with a sound oddly like a hard strum on a banjo, but the windshield didn't shatter. The engine stuttered. Either the fuel had been exhausted at last, or the crash had done severe mechanical damage. Gasping for breath after the cinching punishment of the shoulder harness, praying that the engine wouldn't fail just yet, China popped the car into reverse again. Ideally, the Honda would be blocking the road when the killer came around the bend. She had to force him to stop and to get out of his motorhome. The battered car wheezed, almost stalled, then unexpectedly revved, and China said gratefully, "Jesus," as it rolled backward onto the pavement. She pulled across both lanes, but swung around a little, angling the car uphill so the killer would be able to see the damaged front end as soon as he negotiated the curve. The engine clunked twice and died, but that was all right. She was in position. Without the engine noise for competition, the rain seemed to be falling more forcefully than before, rattling on the roof and snapping against the glass. At the upper curve, darkness still held. She put the Honda in park so it would not coast backward when she took her foot off the brake. The headlights were both broken out, but the windshield wipers continued to thump back and forth, operating on battery power. She didn't switch them off. She opened the driver's door and, feeling horribly exposed in the dome light, started to get out. She needed to be away from the car and in hiding by the time the motorhome appeared, which would be in maybe 20 seconds, maybe 10. Hard to say, because she had lost track of how much time had passed since she herself had driven around the bend. The gun. Before she fully escaped the car, China remembered the revolver. She swung back inside, reached for the weapon, but it was no longer on the seat. In the first or second crash, the gun must have been thrown onto the floor. Leaning across the console between the front seats, she felt frantically in the darkness, found cold steel, the barrel, her finger actually slipping into the smooth muzzle. With a wordless murmur of relief, she fished the gun from the footspace and reversed her grip on it. With the weapon firmly in hand, she scrambled out of the Honda. She left the driver's door standing open. Rain chilled her and wind. In the direction from which she had come, the night brightened faintly, and the redwood trunks near the shoulder of the curve began to glow as if in the radiance of a sudden moon. China sprinted off the slippery blacktop and splashed through another shallow drainage ditch, shuddering as the icy water poured over the tops of her shoes. On this side of the pavement, the trees were set back 20 or 30 feet from the shoulder. She headed for the Colossa Woods at a point directly across the highway from the behemoth into which she had driven the Honda. Long before she reached the nearest tree, she skidded on the spongy mat of wet needles, fell, and landed on a cluster of redwood cones. The cones crumbled slightly, a hard crunching sound against the small of her back, although judging by the flash of pain, it almost seemed as though her spine was the source of the cracking. She would have preferred to crawl on her hands and knees to concealment, but she had to hold on to the revolver, and she was concerned that, crawling, she would inadvertently plug the barrel with dirt or wet needles. She was up and moving at once, therefore, as the highway behind her flared with light, and an engine quarreled noisily with the storm. The motorhome had turned the bend. She was only 15 feet or so from the highway, which wasn't far enough because there was little underbrush to provide cover beneath the giant redwoods, largely ferns and more of them in the gloom ahead than in the area immediately around her. He must not see her. All was lost if he glimpsed her as she dashed for cover. And I'm going to pause at this point because my phone has 3% battery left and finish after I charge it. Finish this chapter.